Hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our Center Court session on the future of work. We have three terrific representatives to talk about what that future looks like. From Imperial College Business School in London, we have Aram Karakashian. He's the Executive Director of Marketing Recruitment and Admissions. We have from Cambridge Judge Business School, Conrad Chua, Executive Director of the MBA. And we have from the Asia School of Business, Sanjay Sarma, the new CEO, President, and Dean of the Asia School of Business in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. Okay, I've played with ChatGPT-4. I've played with Bard. And I wonder if the future of work is we all have nothing to do except put in prompts to artificial intelligence platforms. Will that be true, Sanjay?
No, I don't think it's true. I do think that, well, first of all, you have to put in the prompts. And as you know, that takes some doing. We've had these alarms before when ATMs, automatic teller machines, showed up. People thought that bank tellers would lose their jobs, but they started selling loans and other financial products. And I think that to think that AI is going to take our jobs, I mean, for example, we thought self-driving cars would render drivers useless by now. Well, that hasn't happened either. I think AI should be seen as a superpower, and those who master the superpower will have advantages. And those who would have robotic jobs to some extent will be threatened by the robots that just showed up. But I do think we will have a great, what I call employment migration, and education will play a fundamental part of it.
What do you mean by employment migration? Meaning that more and more people will get jobs in and around that new technology?
Yeah, just like tellers had to sell financial products rather than simply vending money, we will have to work around the technology. The good news is the technology is not infallible. It's spectacular 85% of the time, and it's absolutely terrible 5% of the time. And so we will have to figure out as human beings how we get the spectacular side to make the individual far more productive while also guarding against the downsides. And there'll be whole new jobs, I think, invented. The problem is, can we train people fast enough to take on these new roles? And I worry that governments and companies and countries and regions are not paying enough attention to that.
Yeah, on one level, given all the tech layoffs we've seen in the last 12 months, particularly in the US, you could almost think about AI as a new disruptive innovation that's going to unleash a whole new layer of companies, startups, initiatives that will lead to a lot of employment in the tech industry and will reverse, to some extent, these layoffs that have occurred. Conrad, let me go to you and ask you a more general question about what are some of the current industry trends that you think are shaping the future of work?
Well, John, I think you mentioned the first one, which was AI. And I would say, in terms of AI and digital disruption, the impact and the hype, we're really at that hype cycle, that part of the hype cycle where everything's, I think it's a bit overblown. Because when we look at how AI is transforming businesses, actually business adoption has been relatively slow because businesses have to think, well, how can I use AI in my own business processes? And I think that's the key kind of productivity that jump you'll see. There will be some people, like what Sanjay said, who will lose their jobs. But I think in the next couple of years, it'll be actually processes and workflows that will change because of AI. And this is something that we at Judge Business School, we've been looking at that businesses have to think about which part of their processes are going to change. So I think AI is one. I think the next one is decoupling, or this deglobalization. So again, I think it's a bit overblown in the sense that we won't reach a point where you have the US in one corner and China in the other corner, but definitely that kind of globalization that I myself have been a great beneficiary of. That's probably on pause, if not a bit of a retreat. So I think these are the two big things that people will have to grapple with. And of course, there's sustainability and climate change as well.
Yeah, that's interesting what you say about globalization, because I guess you could just as easily argue that there'll be globalization 2.0. And what is that? That is other countries replacing China as a manufacturing center for the world, as China's relationships with the West become more conflicted. And companies need to place their bets in other places, whether it be Vietnam or whatever. So in a way, it leads to a stronger level of globalization if that plays out. Aaron, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting in terms of where we're going to end up in the next 10, 15 years. And I think as societies, we're moving at a much quicker pace than in previous years. So change is happening on a much more reoccurring cycle than maybe the malaise that we've had in the past, where we had natural growth. You know, we've gone through a range of shocks. And actually, I think with the pandemic, where we are coming out of the pandemic, it has changed some things, changed how people see hybrid work, for example. You know, we saw that supply chains across the world have been affected significantly, and you could say that they're coming back to normal now. There are still some shocks in the system. There's still some areas that aren't back to where they needed to be. China reopening this year has made a difference, but their growth is not in the same way as it used to be. So I think we're still understanding the implications of that change. We obviously in Europe are experiencing the war in Ukraine at the moment, and we don't know where that's going to go, and the shocks that is bringing. These kind of geopolitical considerations do trickle down in terms of the ability for individuals to find work or the industries that they want to go into. I think the other big challenge that I look at, especially in London and in the UK at the moment, is changes in how we see immigration. You know, we've had a recent change that the UK government has brought in around dependence. That has and sets a rhetoric around the world in terms of our openness, in terms of people's want and need to come to the UK. The US has gone through a range of different positions on this that change with the presidency and who's in power. And I think we are also experiencing in Europe in general a migration crisis coming from Africa and other places. So I think the way that the world is moving in terms of international flows of migration is going to also impact how individuals can move across the world in that globalization for work, whether it's across borders, remote, or into new countries, which is often what people are looking for MBA programs to support them with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a way, we're talking about the macro trends and how it may affect society and people in general. I often think of graduate business education as something of a life preserver to keep you afloat and to thrive in these times of uncertainty. Sanjay, certainly the picture for future graduates of elite MBA programs is quite different than the future for overall mankind.
No, I agree. I think that management, I mean, the word management is about following the rules, right? I mean, it's the word itself means converging with the rules. And we're at a time of divergence. And so our MBA graduates will be much more pressure to lead, to rethink, to reshape, to make difficult decisions. So it's a subtle but important thing. I mean, you often hire a management school graduate because they know the things that you know, and you know they'll do what you were doing. Now it's going to be a lot. Of course, the top schools like the ones represented here always created great leaders as well. But that's, I think, the weight is going to change. The second thing is that the idea of a secular horizontal player, someone who understands accounting and finance, the Swiss Army knife, that's good. But now you have this new kid on the block. It's called AI, and you better understand it. I'm sorry, just like the internet, you better understand it. You can't show up and say, "I'll figure it out." We don't have a secular school for priests, where the priest shows up, knocks at the door of a Catholic church and says, "Listen, I don't know your religion very well, but trust me, I can figure it out." You don't do that anymore. And I think they'll be more hard pressed to just sell the Swiss Army knife. They'll have to focus and specialize people a little bit more to make them effective in this new world.
Conrad, do you agree?
I think what AI will show is that it'll expose the people who have blunt Swiss Army knives, right? So I think it's that, for want of a better word, the BSers who get exposed. The people who are still really top of the game and are always learning, figuring out what the implications are of AI or other technologies, whether that's AR with Apple's headset, etc. I think these guys will still be prized. And then the people who are really below the curve, I think they will come up because of AI if they know how to use it. But it's those guys in the middle, the BSs in the middle, who are kind of blunt and have been rehashing stuff. Then I think those guys are in deep trouble.
Yeah, I mean, ideally in a positive way.
Very blunt. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, blunt. Respond.
I was a bad joke. I was saying Conrad was being very blunt.
Conrad is blunt.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make the point that, I mean, the optimistic view of AI and its impact on the future of work is that it will take more drudgery out of work and allow people to be more fulfilled in their work if they are highly educated and adaptable, right? And do what Conrad says. They're not the BSers. These are the people who really add value. And what AI will do is allow them to add even more value than they add today, because it takes the mundane and the bland stuff that they end up having to do, and we all have to do that in our jobs, away. That's the optimistic view of AI. Sanjay, I don't know if you subscribe to that or not.
I actually do. I do.
Yeah.
So the thing about AI is that because it's right, as I said, 85-90% of the time, but really, really wrong, 5-10% of the time. The mundane is that 80-95%. The exceptional is the people who have the skill and the nuance to capture the time when time's going to just draw, right? And so the tedious part, AI can certainly, I think, do a lot of and make the job more interesting, more exciting. The workflow, I think Conrad talked about the workflow. I think that's very critical. How do you work it into the workflow? But in such a way that you can guard against the piece that the AI actually completely messes up. And that is where you need the sharp knife, again, to use Conrad's view. You need the person who can capture the exception. And therefore, I guess, be exceptional. I'm on a real roll with bad puns here.
I would just add that I think with AI and with these tools that are going to be coming out at a rapid pace, the next phase of the rollout, I think for individuals it's about mindset and how they approach these tools. Do they see it in a positive way, as we've been talking, and how they're going to utilize it to enhance their productivity, how they're going to utilize it to improve their daily tasks, to allow them to focus on other areas, to improve the business. And if you're thinking about graduates, that is ultimately what our jobs are, is to put these individuals into that mindset and to give them the confidence and the ability to have a positive mindset when it comes to change, when it comes to disruption in companies. That's why these companies hire our graduates. They want these individuals to come in and have that Swiss Army knife approach, but that is our duty, is to bring our graduates through and help them to have that positive mindset so that they don't just see it as a negative and a barrier and a blocker, but actually they see it as a positive, and how can I utilize this for maximum impact to improve, to support the business or support whatever function or area that they're in.
Aaron, that's a good segue into the next question, which is, what is Imperial College Business School doing to make sure its MBA graduates are not replaced by an algorithm in the future?
I think it's about, well, it's about the mindset. It's about ensuring that individuals who are coming through Imperial and beyond are able to lead in a modern and conscious way. There's so many different challenges that come nowadays with being a leader. You've got so many different plates that you have to spin effectively, whether it's ethics, whether it's about AI, whether it's about people management, the whole range of different spaces. So we want our graduates to be individuals that are not just leading in businesses, but are leading on society's challenges. So when they come through Imperial, they go through a module that we call Leads, and that underpins everything they do in the program: leadership, ethics, awareness, diversity. And it ensures that when they're thinking about solutions, when they're looking at case studies, when they're starting to think about their career path, they're doing it with this fundamental approach underpinning their journey through the program, so that the individuals that we put out into the workplace, whether it's leading companies, going into multinationals, whichever path they take, they're doing it with a sense of purpose and that Imperial leadership within them. And that's important for us in the way that they are going forward.
Sanjay, what are you doing to make sure your MBA graduates are not replaced by an algorithm?
Well, I mean, as I said, if you produce, just to be sort of provocative about it, I think this is a problem for our education system. If we produce robots, we should not be surprised if our students or graduates lose their jobs when the real robots show up. So what we are focusing on is, first of all, we want them to master AI. In fact, tomorrow we have an AI summit, which is hosted by the Asia School of Business, and where we have professors from MIT and other places presenting. And one of our students is actually going to code a website live in 10 minutes that would have taken him a few months to do, several weeks to do.
Using AI technology.
He's going to go live, and hopefully it works. We'll see, because he's done it a few times. As you know, the output changes every time you do it. Right away, live. So we want our students, our graduates, to feel that they have command over this new horse. It's like the horse, it shows up. It can either come and eat your crops, or you can learn to ride it and really use it to increase or improve your productivity and your ability to beat up the kingdom next door. So we really want to put them in command, but we also want to, I think, again, to Conrad's point, make sure they're really sharp, work on the core skills that give them the agility and the sagacity to adapt to a very volatile, I think, future. I mean, it's not just AI. I mean, yesterday,
For sure.
On a plane, I should have been sleeping, but I did watch the Apple release of their new VR AR system, which, by the way, some were quick to reject, but I think it's quite exceptional. And it's going to change a lot of things. And we have to be on top of it. You can't wait for it to come and hit you. So these are the graduates we want to produce who think in those terms.
Yeah, exactly. So it's preparing people for an uncertain future, because everything is uncertain and unpredictable. The pandemic certainly showed us that. And dealing with not all the information you need to make smart decisions. And Conrad, I'm sure that's an important part of the judge program.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's also part of the program in Imperial and ASB as well. I think one of the advantages that we as business school educators have is that the people who come into an MBA, they are already of that mindset that they're already looking ahead, and they can see that, wherever they are in their current circumstances, they can't just stay there. They need to learn new skills, new knowledge. build new networks. And that's why they come to business school. So we are already ahead in terms of the people we get in. And I think the other aspect would be, it's great that we focus on these shiny new technologies, but as Sanjay said, change in your career can come from any unexpected corner. So those fundamental business core classes, whether that's strategy, marketing, corporate finance, are still really important, because that gives you that fundamental knowledge to understand how things are working in a successful organization, in an industry, how things can go wrong. And I think for the business school graduates, they then have to be given that space to think, to have their own view based on what we teach them. To say, okay, this is my view about how a great successful company is going to be built in a particular industry, a particular region. What are some of the risk factors that we have to look out for? What are some of the risk factors that I, as an individual, may have to look out for? And so I think that's really the environment that you can find in a business school. And I think one last point is this idea of continual learning. All of us in this panel, our institutions have very vibrant alumni networks, and that's also a very important source of learning, because while our faculty are obviously churning out good research, great educators, but it's the alumni many times who are at the front lines of change, and they can bring in a lot of very useful practical knowledge to our students.
Yeah, very true. And oftentimes with, I know, experiential learning projects and assignments for students who are taught to work in integrated teams and come up with solutions to different challenges, they're often sponsored by alumni of the different schools. I sometimes think that we expect business schools to do too much. Besides accounting, finance, strategy, operations, marketing, we want you to inculcate in your graduates a full understanding of data analytics. We want them to be sensitive to climate change and understand the opportunities that sustainability provides. We want you to make sure that they have an appreciation for a diverse and inclusive culture. Now we want you to also understand that artificial intelligence platforms of the future will have a dramatic impact on the way we live and work, and that there's opportunity in that too. If anything, the world has become more complex, more sophisticated, more difficult in many ways. And yet there are some who say, well, you don't really need an MBA today. The residential MBA, at least, is a mature product. And yet you would think, with all these other different aspects and all these really overwhelming things that people need to learn about, and I even left out globalization, there is a greater need for advanced education today than has ever existed. And if you're entering business, the MBA is an ideal kind of jet to bring you there. Aram, you agree?
I would agree. I think the MBA is about helping individuals navigate and giving them that path so that all those different challenges that you mentioned, we're not saying that they have to be able to speak on every single one of these and be an expert in all of these, but we want to give them the ability to navigate complex issues, navigate changes in geopolitical tensions that may impact the work they're doing. We want to be able to give them, as I go back to that mindset, and that mindset will then allow them to go off in many different directions, depending on what they have as their own value. Someone may come into an MBA because they want to make a change in sustainability and climate change, but they're lacking a certain set of skills or lacking a certain path to be able to do that. So that is, for me, the path an MBA can provide is facilitates those steps that someone wants to take. You said a jet. For me, it's the path they want to take. Equally, it could be a completely different path that they want to. And I think business schools, as I always say to candidates, there's no other place in the world where you would be put into an environment with all these different people from all around the world, coming from different companies, coming from different backgrounds, for a year of intense learning engagement. What else is going to deliver that for you? And the richness that you get from that is unparalleled at any other institution, not institution, but situation. So it's the program, but it's also the concept of coming into that space and taking that learning to give you that path.
Right. We got a question from someone in the audience that I think is pertinent to our discussion. And it's basically around, what's the future of hybrid work? Are we going to see more companies demand that their employees, their highly educated employees, come back to the office on a full-time basis and no longer allow remote work? Or are we going to see a mix of both? Sanjay, what do you think?
I think we're going to see a mix of both. This is, again, it's sort of like one of those things where you might think that in person is better, but it's going to get more and more difficult to recruit people because lifestyles are changing. And one has to, I think, recognize this is the new reality and figure out how to make it work rather than fighting it. So I do think that hybrid is here to stay. Now, I personally do believe that you get a lot more of the creative stuff done when you're in person. But I'm told by many entrepreneurs, I have a friend of mine has a company in Boston. They've just given up their office and they hire people wherever. And they figured out how to make it work. So I do think that companies have to figure out how to live in a hybrid world rather than try and fight it beyond a point. They've already seen large companies suffer the consequences of insisting. Even companies like Apple, top engineers just not everyone has the cachet of Apple. The rest of us, I think, have to just deal with it.
Yeah. Conrad, do you agree?
Yeah, and I think the other part about having some kind of remote work option is allowing for a more diverse workforce, because there will be people who have to do at a certain point in their career, they may have to look after children, or they may have to look after their parents, as we see with an aging population. And at the same time, they're still productive, and they may be able to give as much as they used to, but they can't commit to that 9 to 5 in the office as they did before. And I think it's going to be a lot about how organizations change their culture, right, to accommodate that range of working patterns, because you still want a collaborative, creative, fast-moving organization. It's a question of how do you do that when not everybody is physically in the same place all the time. And the flip side, of course, is you could have a situation where everybody is physically in the same place all the 9 to 5, 5 days a week. But if you don't have that pillars of trust, that good positive culture, you're still not going to be creative or fast moving. So I think that's where organizations have to go. It's a perennial problem about culture. It's now you just have to apply it differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Aram, and when I mentioned all this long list of things that business schools teach, I deliberately left out one thing that may very well be the most important thing: leadership. Teaching people to lead and work with others effectively to bring out the best in all of us. So let's talk a little bit about leadership, because I think, when you think about the nuts and bolts of business education and all the disciplined learning that's based in the core curriculum, you may often overlook, as a newcomer going into a program, the value of leading others and how it's going to differentiate yourself in the workplace of the future. So I wonder what Imperial does to create leaders.
I think often what I find when I talk to MBA alumni is that it actually wasn't in the program when they discovered their leadership credentials. It was sometimes 1-2 years out, when they're in a situation that they hadn't planned to be in, or had arisen that they hadn't planned for, and they were able to recall something that came from the program, an experience, simulation, a case study, and they had that aha moment. Because when you're in the program, often programs can be quite intense. If you're thinking about applying for roles, you're not able to take that step back and burnish your leadership credentials then and there. It's only in practice that you realize this is my strength. And so we ensure that when they're coming through the program, we give them time to have those step back moments, to be able to reflect and to be able to really assess, have they been able to develop some of the skills that they've wanted to through the program. We have a personal development journey that they go through, and that really sets some goals for them at the beginning towards the end. But I actually think it's beyond that. It's 2 years, 3 years out when they really become that leader and they are able to pull on all the different skills they've learned in the program. That's when they have that aha moment of, this happened in my study group and we dealt with it in this way. Now I have a team of 20 and I'm seeing similar traits. I can now put this into action. So I think that's quite an interesting view on how people see their leadership skills develop through our programs.
Sanjay, what leadership seeds do you plant in your students during their MBA experience at the Asia School of Business?
No, thank you. It's actually a great question. It also comes back to the earlier question about hybrid work. The traditional form of leadership tends to be, it has many sources, but one of them is militaristic, right? Which is you line up the troops, you tell them to turn left, march, etc. There's an MIT style of leadership, which has been written about, which is called the anti-leader leadership approach, right? Which is the other term, which I find quite colorful, is the Jedi leadership, problem-based leadership. Let's solve the problem. It's not about being the boss, right? Now, especially in a hybrid environment, especially in an environment where it's hard to recruit, that really works as well. And it's a very techie approach because you're trying to figure out how to make glass that you can attach to a smartphone that doesn't shatter easily. Actually, that's a well-known case study from Corning, right?
Corning, yeah.
So the idea is to put people in this problem-solving mode and teach them to make certain decisions. Leadership, you have to unbundle it. It is being brave, as I said earlier. It is taking the team in a new direction, proposing ideas, feeling safe, or creating spaces where you feel safe, proposing ideas, and so on. So the way we teach it at ASB and certainly at MIT is by putting students in these action learning situations in real life, where they put it into practice. And I find that works quite well, actually. And as an engineer myself, as an engineering professor, it does jive with my view of the world. And ASB has been doing this for a few years, and I think we'll see more of this actually become necessary in the years ahead.
Yeah, I mean, in the way you're helping people get to that so-called, whether you believe it or not, 10,000-hour rule that became popular with Malcolm Gladwell, where after 10,000 hours of doing something, it's so natural, it's so genuine that you can do it and do it exceptionally well. Conrad, what kind of practice do you put your MBAs through?
We make our students go through these two major group consulting projects. So they're put together in study groups. They are assigned a company or a not-for-profit organization, and it's a real problem that they have to solve. In that first project, it can be quite technical, right? And they have to, none of them in the group may have any prior knowledge into that area, but they've got to think quickly. Thanks to ChatGPT, they can't BS anymore. Not that they were before, but maybe they, and they've got to think, how can they add value? And more importantly, how can they work together as a team? So that's, I think, the most important part that we get our students to go through, which is how do you work in this team that's thrown together? You've got a problem, as Sanjay said. You've got to figure out how do you add value to an actual client. And when I speak to alums and they cast their minds back to the time they spent here, they always mention this experience as being one where they learned a lot about themselves. They learned that they were individually capable of doing a lot more than they thought, but it's not bordering on hubris. It's about understanding that they accomplished this, whatever the project, because they worked well in a team, because the other people in the team worked and supported one another. So that really brings out that kind of leadership aspect in them, that when they go out, it's not just about them as individuals, but how they can bring and support everybody else in that team.
Right. And that is something that ChatGPT, I don't think, can ever really do. Aaron, I want to talk a little bit about the future of business education, not merely the future of work, and how you think it's going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years to address the changing needs of business and the changing needs of the economy. I mean, one thing I think is really powerful about business education is that it does evolve. When employers said they need graduates who are adept at analyzing vast amounts of information and making it useful for decision making, data analytics became a big thing. When businesses became globalization in business school curricula became a big thing. With the importance of diversity today, that is another big challenge that business schools have addressed front and center. And you can just go on and on. But in the next 5 to 10 years, as unpredictable as the world will be, how will business education evolve?
Yeah, I think we're on a path, but we're at an early path because there's a lot of conversations around lifelong learning now.
Right.
And what does that mean in reality? It's one thing to say we offer lifelong learning, but what does that actually mean to the way that we deliver our programs in the standard format, in a much more broken down format, to a much larger audience? I think where I definitely see it going is that business schools will start to really chop up and change how they allow for individuals to come in and come out of the business school. And it isn't just a one transaction and you're an alum. It's actually putting together your learning over either a period of time or continually beyond just your first part of your program. I can easily see whether it's the MBA or other pieces becoming stretched over years and years and years, and you're able to come back and you're able to re-educate and reskill. You know, everything we're talking about now with AI, I'm sure all of our graduates would like to come back to business school and get taught up again on what's happening. And I think that is driving this view that it doesn't just have to be the standard approach. I still think the MBA in its concept and how it operates and what it delivers has a tremendous value, but there are so many other models that now we should be able to offer out and put out there to the market effectively. And I think that's where business schools will have to go, because that's where the market is demanding the learning to be. At the beginning, at the middle, the end of someone's career, we have to be able to adjust and offer the learning at those stages.
Sanjay, your view?
Well, I mean, first of all, if, I did say that we have to embrace hybrid work in companies. Well, we have to embrace it in universities as well, because the opportunity cost is significant. It's not just the tuition, it's also an opportunity cost in a highly volatile world. That's one. The second thing is, I do think that micro-credentials will become important, because not everyone can get an MBA. And you want to learn something. Maybe you're an engineer and you're going to lead a team and you want to learn about, I don't know, finance, accounting, and you want that. And the third aspect of this is that, I mean, imagine if I said to you that, you just need to go to the gym between ages 25 and 28 and you'll be fit for the rest of your life. And obviously that's I've tried that, doesn't work. And so we have to assume, and I would claim, I mean, this is what we want to do, we will do, that it's an all-you-can-eat thing, which is you you graduate, you get your degree, but this is content you will have access to for the rest of your life, because it's like a pilot's license. You know, you need to get recertified, and I think that's the new reality. We're on a treadmill. The treadmill's going backwards. If you're not jogging forward gently, you're going to fall off the back end, and that has to be the new contract with universities.
And I think it's easier for universities than ever before to deliver on that promise. I mean, I've heard deans talk about lifetime learning for over a quarter of a century. Never really happened in any major way, but since the pandemic and the acceleration toward digital learning, I think it's a reality today. It's within reach, and schools are really trying to make it happen in a way that they had never before had. Conrad, your view of the future of business education?
Well, just to add to what Aram and Sanjay said, there's obviously all these different formats that's going to happen. The content will continue to evolve. I think the other aspect would be the mindset that we in business schools have about learning, right? And I think when we look at lifelong learning itself and the huge numbers of alums, I mean, for all our institutions, the number of students we have at any one point in time is just a tiny fraction when you look at the whole alumni community. I think when you look at that community and think, what is the problem or job that lifelong learning is going to solve for them? For some people, it'll be going through credentials, getting maybe a deep dive into a topic. But I think for a large majority of people, they want business schools to, again, cut away the noise, cut away the BS, and tell them actually what is the really salient thing that's happening in the business world, whether that's in sustainability, in technology, in diversity inclusion. And I think that the kind of learning that alums want is, give me the headlines from faculty giving us the headlines, but then tapping into that alumni network and having the same kind of conversations that they had when they were here full time, or maybe coming in on their weekend classes. But now with that huge community and being able to say, okay, this is the big headline trend. What is it? What does it mean in my particular country, in my particular industry? Who are the other people in my alumni group who are in this situation, or maybe in a different area where I can see, draw parallels, connect the dots in a way that nobody else saw. So I think that part of learning, where it's not so much the kind of structured learning that people have when they're a student, I think that part becomes hugely important in lifelong learning.
Yes, and it's great of you to remind us that one of the great value adds of an MBA education is the network that you establish while you're on campus, and that endures through a lifetime in your career. And let's face it, as good as the faculty are, most of the learning in MBA programs comes from your classmates and the experiences that they bring into the class that are orchestrated by a great faculty member. Hey, I want to thank all of you for a really fascinating discussion. I so enjoyed it, and I'm forever grateful to all three of you for participating. Sanjay at Asia School of Business, thank you so much. Aaron at the Imperial College Business School in London, thank you. And Conrad at Cambridge Judge Business School. And Conrad, I will see you on Monday for lunch in Cambridge.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
Looking
all right,
forward to that.
For all of you out there, thanks for watching. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. You are watching Center Court.